Hello everyone. Today we continue to read Robert Spalding's book, Stealth War: How China Took Over While America's Elite Slept. Robert Spalding retired from the U.S. Air Force as a brigadier general after more than 26 years of service. He completed his career as the senior director for the strategic planning to the president at the National Security Council and was the chief architect for the national security strategy. He is a former China strategist for the chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff and Joint Staff at the Pentagon, as well as a senior defense attaché to China. He earned his doctorate in economics and mathematics from the University of Missouri and is fluent in Mandarin. 大家好，今天我们继续来读罗伯·斯伯丁的书《隐形战》。中国如何在美国精英沉睡时悄悄夺取世界霸权？罗伯特·斯伯丁是美国空军退役准将，在美国空军服役长达26年，是 B-2 隐形轰炸机联队的联队长。罗伯特·斯伯丁曾经起草过美国的国家安全报告，是美国国家安全战略的策划人。罗伯·斯伯丁曾经担任驻中国的武官。罗伯特·斯伯丁毕业于密苏里大学，拥有数学和经济学博士学位，同时他精通中文。Chapter 3: Economy. Subtitle: Corporate Espionage 2.0. Corporate espionage and intellectual property (IP) theft rarely get talked about. If a jewelry store or a museum is robbed, the cops are called. The newspapers report on the heist and talk about the value of what was stolen. It becomes a quantifiable event. A 2 million haul or a 10 million painting, 10 million US dollar painting. Everyone talks about a crime at work, on Twitter, on late-night TV. Once suspects are identified, a manhunt ensued. But with corporate espionage and IP theft, there is usually a coin of silence. Done well, corporate theft is invisible. It involves copying documents, engineering plans, chemical formulas, computer codes, raw data. That's different from stealing a Picasso off a museum wall. Imagine stealing the painting and replacing it with an excellent forgery, though one so good that it takes a whole year for an expert to notice the original has vanished. This kind of delayed, "we've been robbed" reaction happens all too often in the corporate world, but the reaction is muted. Reporting the theft can lower investor confidence, hurt company morale, and tip off competitors. A number of well-known auditing and accounting companies, Ernst & Young, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers, KPMG, conduct private investigations into suspected corporate espionage. The level of CCP-sponsored attacks these firms encounter varies from the most basic, bribing employees to copy documents, placing students at research institutes and pressuring them to steal, to sophisticated multi-operative hacking raids and full-blown intelligence operations. In 2014, the chairman of a large hedge fund sent me a privately commissioned briefing about illicit Chinese activity in U.S. corporations. The briefing was stunning in scope and detail, and the information it contained shook my view of the world to its very foundations. The most disturbing slides detailed an assault to gain control of a proprietary technology that a fledgling firm had developed. The method of attack reminded me of the sophistication of an air campaign. It was perfectly choreographed to create subtle misdirection and open up a target for blizzard rig. The operation highlights the enormous amount of resources the CCP will delegate to sabotaging corporate rivals to obtain control over coveted technology. Here's what happened. An American chemical company, owned by a private equity firm, had patented some groundbreaking green technology and was growing at a steady clip. Its owner began developing a 5-year plan to take the company public. But suddenly, the company started missing its earnings targets. The problem appeared to be in sales. Orders were down, and in logistics, the division that handled the flow of products. The sales guy was fired, but the bleeding continued. The owners met with the leadership team and warned them to fix the issues, because continued shortfalls would put the planned IPO in jeopardy. Not long after that, the company received an unsolicited offer from the Chinese company. The offer shocked the owners. It was 30% below what the value should have been, had it not been for the shortfalls. Management was stunned. How did these suitors make such an accurate valuation without company data? It seems like they knew about recent losses. The owners hired investigators. They discovered that not only had a chemical company been hacked, but so had a private equity firm that owned it. The hackers knew the company's earnings targets and red lines in terms of what was unacceptable to the owners. The levels of sabotage was, on a spycraft level, brilliant. The email servers were selectively hacked so that when the company would send out solicitations for orders, hackers would delete them before they were sent. Similarly, when orders came in, some of them never made it into the sales team's inbox because the hacker pulled them out. The selective sabotage was enough to hurt sales, but not enough to trigger an investigation. Meanwhile, the hackers also damaged back-end logistics. When an order came in for, say, 1,000 units, hackers would change the number to 900. When the shortfalls was discovered, usually after the order was shipped or about to be shipped, a back order would be created. This subtle move created added costs for labor, delivery, and other sectors, which impact the bottom line. It was a dazzling operation, subtle, almost imperceptible. The only entity that would have the resources and the sophistication to execute such an elaborate ruse would be the state. This sinister operation crystallized the level of economic warfare that China was engaged in. It wasn't just stealing. Copying documents is the corporate equivalent of a smash-and-grab robbery. This was a strategic sting on a number of levels. At some points, the CCP had set industrial policy and made green technology a priority. Once the American chemical startup was identified, someone spearheaded an operation that required both intelligence planning, hacking by the People's Liberation Army, and oversight and analysis by a Chinese-owned business. The goal was to sabotage and devalue an American company in order to acquire it at a below-market price, to obtain technology that the CCP considered vital. It was nothing less than a government-sanctioned assault on an American company. When I joined the Joint Chief of Staff in 2014, I shared this brief with practically everyone I met in the Pentagon. The reaction was always the same. "Oh my God, this is horrible." Then they would say, "That's not my job." And of course, in keeping with the military's traditional mission, that made perfect sense. The job of the military is to plan the fight, prepare for the fight, execute the fight, or maintain order. Protecting American businesses, that's nothing to do with us. But to me, this was a clear-cut act of war. It was hostile, it was predatory, it was in violation of international law, and it was meant to hurt our nation. I went to the Treasury and Department of Commerce. I met with the State Department. The response I got was jaw-dropping. "China's not our adversary. They're our friends," was the standard response. "We cooperate with them." I would look at them and think, "But I just show you research that proves they are not our friends." I came to the conclusion that there was nobody doing anything about China's trade espionage and economic warfare. It was a hot potato issue, and nobody wanted to touch it. I finally found one ally in the Joint Chief of Staff. I don't want to name him, but I regard him as a hero. And like so many senior officers, he understood that economic warfare was, in fact, warfare, and that as the military has a duty to protect new frontiers. And he gave me the go-ahead to study Chinese economic hostilities and develop strategies to address issues. When I told people what I was working on, a frequent response would come in the form of a disbelieving question. "Why are you looking at this?" My answer, "Because nobody else is." Trade market mayhem. Sabotage and espionage are just two ways to upend a market. The CCP also relies on many other strategies to control and dominate markets, from predatory pricing and bait-and-switch deals to old-fashioned bullying. Let's start with bullying. China is the world's leading producer of seafood, generating nearly 70 million tons in 2017. It employs an estimated 1 million people in its frozen fish industry, which is also the largest in the world. China's seafood exports totaled $19.3 billion in 2016. Interestingly, wild fish caught within Chinese ocean waters during the first 9 months of 2017 declined 11.9%. But according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, fish caught in other territorial ocean waters increased by 14.2% from the previous year. In other words, China, which accounts for more than 60% of global production of caught seafood, can sustain its wild seafood production by relying on catches from its old coastal waters. So what does it do? It sends its fishing vessels around the world to raid the coastal waters of weaker states, frequently preying on nations that don't have strong or even any naval forces. To be clear, fishing in international waters is perfectly legal, but exploiting the riches of, say, Ecuador's Galapagos Island, where, in August 2017, 20 Chinese fishermen was found with a catch of 6,600 sharks, is a violation of international law. According to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, exclusive economic zones for fishing extend 200 nautical miles from a nation's coastline. In South America, Chinese ships have been spotted fishing in the waters of Argentina, Chile, Peru, and other nations. In March 2016, the Argentina Coast Guard caught a Chinese ship, the Lu Yan Yu, fishing in its waters and fired a warning shot to stop it. The Lu Yan Yu tried a ramming maneuver, but it backfired. The Argentinians fired and the ship sank. Today, many Chinese fishing vessels outfit themselves with buffers that can serve as battering rams and prevent other ships from closing in on them. While China claims it is monitoring the situation aggressively, Chinese trawlers have nevertheless been spotted as far away as South Africa. Strong-arming smaller nations in order to steal their natural resources is one tactic. Offering generous development deals that mask usurious terms is another. China is currently in the midst of building out its multi-trillion-dollar Belt and Road global infrastructure initiative to dominate the delivery of goods across the planet. We will dive deeper into the implications and intent of Belt and Road later on. But since we are discussing market control, it's worth noting two things. That controlling shipping is one method of creating a stranglehold on trade flows, and that building out infrastructure for economically challenged countries is a great way to gain economic leverage in the countries you are supposedly helping. These initiatives are, in a sense, debt and market access traps. One recent example of how China manipulates helpful foreign aid into control is the massive Hambantota Port project in Sri Lanka, a war-torn country that has not been high on anyone's list of trading partners for decades. But over the 10-year period during which Sri Lanka President Mahinda Rajapaksa held office, the state-owned China Harbour Engineering Company struck enormous deals for cash and credit to build a multi-billion-dollar deep-dredged port on the southern end of the island. Rajapaksa lost the presidential election in 2015, leaving the new leaders swamped by the debt of his China deals, and China acting more like a loan shark than a benevolent ally, refused to ease up on negotiated terms. In 2017, the Sri Lanka government handed over control of the port and 15,000 acres of land around it for 99 years. China now has a port that both abuts and skirts India, its largest manufacturing competitor, and while the lease for Hambantota prohibits China from using it for naval purposes, there is considerable concern that it will try to negotiate those terms, or, as it so often does with legal matters, just ignore them. For all intents and purposes, however, it is clear that China didn't exactly help Sri Lanka improve its infrastructure. It swamped the country in debt and has now gained significant economic control over the struggling but strategically placed nation. Giving sweetheart deals to nations with stagnating economies is actually standard operating procedure for certain CCP-backed companies, and the strings that are attached may not always be evident. China has been extremely active in Africa. In 2018, President Xi pledged $60 billion to $80 billion in aid to African nations. China does not interfere in Africa's internal affairs and does not impose its own will on Africa, Xi said. What we value is the sharing of the development experience and the support we can offer to Africa's national rejuvenation and prosperity. But accepting Chinese money is fraught with issues. If China builds out a phone network, it owns the IP, If a Chinese company builds a power plant, its own plans and operation. And this project, like Sri Lanka's port, can be dead traps. Controlling vital infrastructure allow China to apply pressure in other areas. Reports note that African governments have been pressured not to recognize Taiwan. No doubt they will be pressured to remain silent on China's repression of Uyghurs, Tibet, and free speech advocates. In this way, aid money can be turned into what might be termed a freedom trap. In a remarkably short time, Transsion Holdings, a Shenzhen company founded in 2016, has captured the African mobile phone market and unseated Korean global giant Samsung. The newcomer devised some Africa-specific innovations, like multiple SIM card slots, allowing the phone to be shared among users with different numbers and service providers. Models were designed to have longer battery life, given that electricity is a rare commodity in parts of the continent. But the company acquired customers by undercutting the market on pricing, reportedly offering the phone for as little as $50. Transsion Holdings, then, has succeeded through innovation and aggressive pricing. Was that pricing underwritten by the Bank of China? Who knows? Should these new customers feel comfortable about the privacy of their data, they have reason to be nervous. With the most Chinese enterprises, the risk of CCP interference is always a possibility. As noted earlier, every Chinese corporation must have a CCP member on its board, and an African country dominated by Transsion, or any country that relies on Chinese telecommunications, may one day run the risk of its data being abused for economic purposes or to maintain social control. Down on the corner. Rare earth metals sounds like the name of a progressive rock band, and the specific name of these elements, dysprosium, neodymium, gadolinium, and ytterbium, sound like planets on Star Trek, but they are among the most important materials in our digital era, used in key components in the manufacture of everything from smartphones and hard drives to radar and advanced weapon systems. Legend has it that Deng Xiaoping once said, "There's oil in the Middle East, but there are rare earths in China." The fact is, there are rare earth metals in other places, including California, which once hosted a giant mine owned by the now-defunct Moly Corp. But when China becomes a low-cost supplier, it pushes everyone else out of the market. As of 2019, China owns an estimated 90 to 95% of the supply of these metals. This gives it the ability to stop electronics manufacturing anywhere in the world. All the CCP has to do is decide to restrict exports, or it could set prices so high that the cost prohibits purchase. It's a scary prospect, but not as scary perhaps as other markets China has cornered. It is the world's #1 producer of cement, steel, and chemical fertilizer. There are plenty of stunning metrics that convey China's otherworldly growth, but the claim that the country used more cement between 2011 and 2013 than the United States consumed in the entire 20th century may be the most jaw-dropping. It simply doesn't seem possible, and yet it makes perfect sense. As of 2015, China produced about 80% of the world's air conditioners, 70% of its mobile phones, and 60% of its shoes, according to The Economist. To make all that stuff, you need a lot of concrete to build factories.